Hi, Grandma here reading Tirzah, and I'm going to begin with chapter 10, Old Hannah's Child. Now, Hanna, has with her an Egyptian girl who, her name is Merrie, M-E-R-R-I-E. We met her a couple of chapters ago. In the morning sun, the desert floor sparkled with what looked like white frost. Everywhere near the tamarisk trees, women and children were picking up the thin white flakes. Tirzah sat on her heels and carefully lifted a flake. It lay in her hand, as light as a feather and cool to her touch. So this is the bread Moses meant, she thought. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Gently, she began to gather the tiny wafers into her basket. Do anyone know what the name of this food is that they found? It's called manna, and it is a gift from God. She was finished before Oren and started back to the tent. Ephon, the only child of Hamil, the cart maker, joined her. Glad for the company, Tirzah waited for her. Ephon was broadly built like her father, her hands large and strong. Tirzah knew that the girl worked like a son with her father, helping him fashion the heavy cart wheels. She was a cheerful girl, though she seldom had time for anything but work. Tirzah liked her and secretly admired Ephon's strength. Ephon carried 2 large baskets, holding as much as Tirzah's and Oren's together, since there were only 3 in Ephon's family. Tirzah was curious. Moses' instructions were to gather an omer for each person, no more, no less. She couldn't help asking, Ephon, are you gathering bread for another household? Ephon shook her head. No, Father's order this morning was to gather enough for 2 days, because tomorrow I will be needed to help him fix an axle for Shobal's cart. You know that we are a large family, though we are but 3. She laughed at her joke and went on, so I thought I'd better take enough to satisfy our appetites for both days. Tirzah wondered if Ephon's reasons would satisfy Moses. Oh, well, I suppose in your case it's all right to gather for 2 days. As she said the words, a little twinge of guilt pinched inside her. She ignored it and went on chatting with Ephon about the coming day's small events. As soon as the morning sun had turned hot, the white flakes of manna vanished like the morning dew, leaving no trace on the ground. Tirzah's supply of manna, as it was called, baked into a delicious bread with the faint taste of honey. She was sorry when the last of it disappeared into Ram's mouth. They were full now, but what about tomorrow? Come, Tirzah, help me clear these bowls away. Her mother's voice broke into her thoughts, making Tirzah blurt out, Will there be more tomorrow? Manna, I mean. Do you think it will come again? Leah's eyes were surprised. I never thought of there not being more. Why shouldn't there be more? Didn't Moses say we would have bread to eat? Didn't he say not to leave any of it overnight, not one bit? Why shouldn't it be there tomorrow and the day after that? Her mother picked up a mat and carried it to the tent, letting Tirzah know that the conversation was ended. Tirzah sighed as she lifted a small crumb from her skirt. She hoped her mother was right. In the morning, as soon as the dew lifted from the ground, Tirzah hurried to look. It was there. White flakes everywhere around the trees and shrubs. Yahweh's gift of bread had come again. With a little dancing step, she set her basket down and began to gather the wafers. A footstep behind her made her turn to look at Ephon. But I thought you weren't going to come today. What happened, Ephon? Ephon's face was red, her eyes swollen as though she had been crying. I told Father what Moses said, not to take more than 1 day's worth. This morning there was no manna left in our jar, nothing but a stinking mass of worms. She screwed up her face at the memory of it. Father blames me, though I had nothing to do with it. Now I must hurry and get back to help him before he gets into such a temper, as he will never get out of this day. Ephon bent quickly to her work, and Tirzah went on with hers. She was sorry for the girl, who really wasn't to blame for her father's stubborn ways. Again, when the sun became hot, The manna disappeared. Tirzah wasn't worried. They had given enough for today, and tomorrow she would gather more. On the day before the Sabbath, she and Oren brought home a 2-day supply, just as Moses had instructed. This time it didn't go wormy or smell. On the Sabbath morning, there was no manna laying on the desert floor. A few people who had counted on it went home with empty baskets. A lone hawk hung motionless on the air, high above the rocky ledge on which Ram sat. He could have spent his Sabbath in the camp talking lazily with the others, but the wilderness had drawn him like a magnet. Something in him felt the desert's emptiness, as it was a part of him. Overhead the hawk soared. Like the bird, Ram felt alone. He'd changed. In Egypt he'd been a child, but no more. The hawk was circling, climbing higher, as if inspecting the desert below. Shading his eyes, Ram watched the bird search for its food. Its sharp eyes were a wonder, and even at that great height, not a creature as small as a mouse would escape its sight. Ram turned away stricken. Why had he been so blind? He'd fallen once into the trap of foolishly following after his uncle Shobal and the others who refused to believe Moses. Closing his eyes, he whispered, "Surely, Yahweh, you showed your might through your servant Moses. Who could doubt your wisdom now?" But he had doubted. Why was it that one moment his heart was light, knowing his father's love for him was unchanged, and the next wretched, empty, worthless? Would he doubt the next time his faith was tested? Was he destined to be a failure? After a long while, Ram opened his eyes, saw that the hawk was gone, and let himself down from the ledge to the rocks below. His sandals made little sound as he stepped from rock to rock, watching carefully for the small scorpions that liked to shelter from the heat in the shadow of the boulders. Halfway down, he stood still and listened to a muffled sound coming from somewhere close by. At first, Ram thought it was a small animal snuffling, but as he listened, he was sure it was a child crying softly. Cautiously, he made his way around a large overhanging rock toward the sound. Suddenly, he stood directly in front of a small, huddled figure of a girl, her face streaming with tears. The fear that leaped into her face startled Ram. "It's all right," he explained quickly. "I didn't know you were here. I'm sorry. Look, if you've hurt yourself, I can go and get help." He felt the awkwardness of his words even as he said them. The girl was obviously not harmed. She was an Egyptian girl, probably one who had fled Egypt as a servant to one of his people. Hastily, she got to her feet, backed away from him toward the rock wall. "I'm fine now, thanks. It's nothing." She brushed the wetness from her face, then looked up at him, her chin set defiantly, much like Tirzah's, Ram thought. "Well then, if you are all right, I'm glad. My name is Ram." He stood awkwardly, not sure whether to leave her or not. The girl bowed her head slightly and replied, "I'm Merrie, servant to Hanna, the midwife." Ram knew that old Hanna no longer practiced her midwifery, although some still called her by that name. "I'm going to the camp that way now. Shall I walk you back?" A flush of deep color rose in the girl's cheeks. "Oh, no. I must run back quickly. I've been gone too long already." In a single leap, she was on the rock below him, scampering like a deer lightly to the desert floor. Ram watched her half amused, half admiring the girl's quickness. She would be safely back at camp before he arrived there himself. Something glittered on the rock and caught Ram's eye as he turned to go. It was a bracelet, small enough to fit a slender arm. The girl's, perhaps? He picked it up and examined its finely carved silver closely. He could make little of the markings, though it looked like Egyptian writing. Oren might know. Stuffing the bracelet into the pouch at his belt, he leaped to the next rock. He would have to find her and return the thing. As he reached the ground, he wondered why she had been crying. At Hanna's tent, Merrie paused for breath. She'd run all the way. This time, no young children had pelted her with small stones the way they had yesterday. As she bent to draw water for herself and Hanna, she could hear their voices all over again when she thought of it. Dirty, dirty Egyptian, go home, go home. The child who had started the chant was a boy of almost 6 or 7. Merrie had hurried away as quickly as she could. The tent flap was up, and Merrie stepped quietly inside. Old Hanna sat nodding over a half-eaten honey cake. Home, Merrie thought. Where is home now? Gently she removed the cake from the gnarled fingers and laid it nearby. She would go and draw water for them now while others rested. Then she remembered. On the Sabbath, all work was forbidden. Tomorrow she would find another way, perhaps in the afternoon when the sun grew too hot even for the children. It was hot now, and Merrie undid the long black braid of her hair that hung to her waist. How often Passer had told her that she was blessed with the most beautiful hair in Egypt. It was true that it grew unusually thick and would wave and curl about if she let it. She shook it out now, smoothing it, then braiding it tightly once more. Finishing, she rubbed her cheeks to erase all tear marks, feeling again the squareness of her face. She was plain, hair or no hair. She'd gone to the house of Peleg as she was dressed in her Egyptian clothes, the same one she wore now. Thoughtfully, she smoothed the soft linen she was so used to. Maybe she could make herself more like the Hebrew women, dress like they did, so she wouldn't stand out. Behind her, Hanna woke up with a little snore, and Merrie knelt at her feet. "What is it, little bird? What makes you look so thoughtful?" Hanna asked, her old eyes awake and sharp. She listened to Merrie's plan, nodding now and then in approval. When they were alone, Merrie turned around and round for Hanna to see. The wool robe was loose and simple. "From top to bottom, you look like I did when I was a girl," the old woman said softly. "Yahweh has been kind to me," Merrie said. "I hope he will not mind that I dress like his people." Hanna drew the girl to her for a moment, then held her arm's length. "If you will obey Yahweh's words and listen to them carefully, will he not be pleased with you? You too have fled Egypt and turned away from the gods of Egypt to Yahweh, and he has brought you safely here." The old woman paused, placed a thin hand under Merrie's chin. "In all the years I have laid many babies in their mother's arms, not once have I had a child of my own. Do you think Yahweh brings me a child in my old age? One that will be more comfort to me than I can be to her?" Merrie's eyes brimmed with tears. "I will be a daughter to you as long as Yahweh lends me breath." Hanna chuckled. "May that be longer by far than I expect he shall lend me. These old bones have lived a long time. I only hope they will last until we get to the promised land." Anxiously, Merrie watched Hanna make her way slowly and painfully from the tent. She would care for the old woman, see that she rested more and ate well, if only she would not die and leave her here alone. "Please, Yahweh, please do not let her die," she prayed. So what is Merrie so afraid of? Well, she's afraid that if Hanna dies, she will be all alone because she has no family, and that people will taunt her for being Egyptian, like the children have done. It's a problem. Okay, see you next time. Bye-bye.